What is up, everybody? It's your Bill and Sean Simon here, Lock Bottoms Up podcast, dedicated to addiction recovery. We are so excited to shine the light on the tough journey of addiction recovery. Today, we're talking about the often hidden struggles people face in this path. These challenges affect millions, but there is hope. Through powerful stories from those who have faced these battles and won, we aim to inspire and give you the tools to overcome. Each episode, we bring you real-life stories and expert advice to help you understand and support recovery. So whether you're on your own recovery journey or supporting a loved one or just want to learn more, you're in the right place. Let's break the chains together. Welcome to Rock Bottoms Up. Let's get those parties started. Today's guest, we have Brandi Paul. Brandi, thank you so much for being with us.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Brandi and I, this is not our first time doing the podcast, as we have done a previous podcast, but your boy here didn't hit the record button, so here we are again. So excited to be able to finally get Brandi's story out. Brandi, I like to introduce my guests and allow the guests just to give just a little background story about you, where you came from and where you're at today.
Okay. So I was originally from Florida. I grew up just south of Jacksonville, and then when I was about 9 years old, we moved from Florida to Georgia, to northeastern Georgia. So it was basically one small town to the next, because where I grew up in Florida, it was about 45 minutes, I think, from Jacksonville, a little tiny town called Green Cove that no one's ever heard of. Now I'm in, which is another teeny tiny town that no one's heard of.
Moving on up. So you moved, and it's where you reside today, right?
Yes, I stayed in Clayton.
Right on. Well, Brandi, let's get right on into it. Let's talk about your road into addiction. Where did it all start? Or when did you first have issues with addiction?
It actually started like right when we moved from Florida to Georgia. I think it was 5 months after we moved, 4 or 5 months after. My parents took me to the pediatrician because they thought I had like a UTI or something. And the pediatrician was like, no, her blood sugar is actually really, really high. You need to go to the hospital, like now. Like, don't even go home and pack a bag. Get to the hospital because this is bad. Yeah. So from like, we were on the way to the lake that day too. We were just like gonna swing by the pediatrician's office and then go to the lake and have a fun day. So, that didn't happen.
Yeah. So you get to the hospital, get to the hospital. What happened there? Or what did you find out?
I didn't really find out anything. No one, just because my parents were so frazzled and trying to understand what was going on because we didn't know anything about type 1 diabetes.
Yeah.
So they really told me what was happening. Like all I can remember is being in the waiting room, like the triage kind of area, and the coming in and saying that we're gonna give me a shot of insulin, but like I didn't know what that was. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. So you're real young and you got hit with a condition.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disorder where your immune system is attacking your pancreas, the part of your pancreas that makes insulin that regulates your blood sugar levels. Yeah, but nobody, like, I don't ever remember anybody in the hospital sitting me down and explaining all of that. It was just all of a sudden, I had no control over anything anymore.
Yeah.
Because now we have like insulin pumps and continuous glucose monitors and service dogs and all kinds of things to help you manage. But back then, CGMs were or continuous glucose monitors were not quite as common. And the doctor that I was seeing, he didn't really believe in insulin pumps for some reason. I don't know why. So he kept me on insulin shots. And it was like, so with those types of insulin, you have to be like super, super, super strict. You have to like basically do and eat the same things every single day to make it work.
Wow.
And that's a lot for a 9-year-old child.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So how did that impact you at such a young age?
I mean, just not knowing what was going on. Like
Yeah,
all I knew that was I just suddenly lost control over everything, right down to what I was eating and when I was allowed to eat it.
yeah.
And for me, that became kind of like a control thing that led to an eating disorder. I remember
Mm,
there was a specific moment in the hospital. Um, we just kind of fell into this routine for the week I was there where my mom would stay with me. Um, we knew the only people we really knew in town was my dad's brother and his wife and my three cousins. So my older brother, who's also named Chad, was staying with them.
best name ever.
Right. And friend Gabby was visiting us at the time because we had grown up together in Florida. So she was visiting at that time and she had to go stay with Uncle Peter and Aunt Lisa as well.
Mm,
And then my dad, whenever he got off work in the afternoons, then he would come over. And then Uncle Peter and Aunt Lisa would come over and they would bring my cousins and my best friend and my brother. And then we would all be together for like dinner until visitation hours were over.
yeah,
The nurses were pretty good. Like they would let my family stay as long as they wanted, even past
yeah,
visitation hours, which was really nice of them.
yeah.
But I remember there was this one night in particular where my dad came in with a box of pizza.
Mm.
And I thought that it was like a surprise because here I am stuck in the hospital. And hospital food is disgusting. I don't know if you've ever had it or
Yeah,
not, but it's gross.
yeah. Well,
Yeah. So I was like, I was excited because I thought I was going to get pizza instead of whatever the hospital was serving.
yeah,
And then
I
I looked
bet.
at my mom. She's like doing this, trying to get my dad to take it out before I could see it. And that's when I
Oh,
realized they were gonna eat it in the hallway. Like they were gonna take turns sneaking out in the hallway and eating pizza while I was stuck with hospital food.
oh
And it
man.
was literally physically felt something shift in me. And it was
Yeah.
like I suddenly didn't want the pizza anymore. I didn't want food in general anymore. That was like the millisecond the eating disorder started.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier how this condition that you were diagnosed with, type 1, type 2, type 1. Um, you said that, this condition led to an eating disorder. And so this in particular um, situation was kind of your way to not allow this condition to control your life in a
Yes.
negative way because it led to an eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, it was just
diabetes
all
really impacted you a lot.
yeah, and then as I've gotten older, I've realized that eating disorders are actually really, really common in
Yeah,
type 1 diabetics. And I
yeah,
would assume they're probably having that same control struggle as I was.
yeah. Good point. Good point.
Yeah.
So, like, you got faced with this condition, and then how did the eating disorder and impact you? Because how old were you at this point?
I was 9.
You were just 9
Yeah.
years old. You developed an eating disorder. And what kind of
Yeah.
disorder was it? Do you know?
It was called eating disorder not otherwise specified
Hmm.
because I spent so long just like jumping from one disordered behavior to the next that I didn't fully
Wow.
fit into categories. And so the EDNOS for short, it tends to be the hardest to diagnose. And there's like this toss up with the studies over whether that one or anorexia is the most deadly, but it's one of those two.
Wow. And is that because it's so hard for somebody to see what's going on?
Yeah, because it took my family like 10 years to figure it out.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So when you say that, like, so I guess you would do different things to hide your eating disorder. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And what were some of those things that you would do to hide your eating disorder?
I mean, when I was in school, it was super easy because a lot of my friends would eat breakfast before school
Yeah.
because, school not good either. So they would eat breakfast before school, but then they would eat lunch like when we got out of school. They would just have like a late lunch. So they thought that that's what I was doing. And then my parents thought I was eating breakfast and lunch at school. So it was
right.
really like trick everybody that way.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. I could see that. Um, so, as you went through school, with your conditions, how did that impact you as far as socially, academically? Um, what was your home life like?
I think just because it was so hidden, it didn't really impact anything.
Mm,
Um, it would be like it would add a little stress here and there because I was trying to hide it. Like if I thought somebody was catching on, I would get stressed out about it and try to act normal for a little bit to try to throw
yeah.
them off. But other than that, like I didn't have as much of a social life as most kids anyway because there were so many bullies in the school, whether it
Yeah.
was skin color or diabetes. Like I just got picked on a lot. I had like
Yeah.
a really good friend in high school that I knew I could trust, and we're actually friends. Like I was in her wedding last year.
Oh, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Friendships are so important, and going through, like you said, moving, having diabetes, and not just any diabetes, the one that you have to take a shot, that had to impact you through school as well, right?
yeah, it did. I was on an insulin pump by that time, but like I remember times where like other kids would see me take a shot or something because my pump wasn't working right, and they would
Mm,
freak out about it because they thought it was gross. Or
yeah.
they would see me check my blood sugar and they would freak out about that. There was one time I was in chorus class and I had like the music stand in front of me, so I thought I could just like sneak and take an insulin shot in my stomach, right, like behind the thing, so no one would see.
Yeah.
But the girl next to me saw and she freaked out about it, like, "Oh, that's so disgusting!" And then the teacher took her side and was like, "You really shouldn't be doing that in class. It really does freak people out, and it's kind of gross." And I'm like, so you want me to walk clear across campus, which would entail walking up a few flights of stairs, and it's got like a
Wow.
10-minute walk to get there just to go take a shot and come back when I'm already not
Wow.
feeling good. My blood sugar's off. No, thank you.
So not only were you getting bullied, it doesn't seem like you got a lot of support from faculty.
No, the faculty really did not like me.
Oh
I had
man.
2 teachers by the end of my high school career that didn't hate me.
Wow. So school was really tough for you then.
School was very, very tough. And I think a lot of it was they were just kind of used to not making accommodations. Like I had
Yeah.
a cousin who was in school with me at the same time and he's legally blind.
Oh
And one of the
wow.
accommodations we were supposed to make for him was to put these colored pieces of papers on his doors that he's supposed to go into because he has like a tiny bit of vision. Most people who are legally blind can see like a little bit.
Mm,
And so he would have seen that and known that that's his room he's supposed to go in because those little numbers on the door that are like this big, he can't see that. And the
yeah.
school told my aunt that they did that for him, but I walked around and I looked at all his classes and they had not.
Oh geez.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So I was that kid that was like, I'm not gonna let you treat me like this. You're gonna make
Wow.
these for me because you legally have to, and they didn't like
Yeah. Yeah. They're like, we don't like to give special treatment to those who need it.
that. Right?
That's horrible.
It
That's
was.
horrible. So, as you went through school, went through high school, eating disorder, what were you dealing with, like on the emotional end of that? Like how was that impacting like you as a person?
Was definitely like in that fight or flight mode, but I didn't
Mm,
fully understand that until I got out of high school. And suddenly
yeah,
things evolved, and I was like, what is this?
yeah, right. Because you kind of have to when you're not getting support from the faculty, the kids at school are bullying. That had to take a huge hit on your self-esteem and confidence.
I did. I think I was like 16 when I started cutting as a means of coping with all of that on top of the eating disorder.
Yeah, yeah. So that started about what time? 16? And did you, I mean, do you remember the first time you did it and why you did it?
I remember doing it. I don't really fully remember why. I think it was just stress from school and trying to find that release, you know?
Really? Because I too had forms of self-harm, but I wouldn't cut. I would, bite my finger. And I remember it probably took place around seventh grade, I think. And I remember my first time doing it was out of anger. I didn't know how to communicate because, I just, struggled with communication, growing up and being able to explain what I was feeling because I was so different in school. And I too was bullied a lot. And so because of that, I think it led me to self harm. But I remember the first time that I got angry, I bit into myself. I bit my knuckles, bit my fingers, and it was out of complete rage. I was so upset of I think it was in like this instant I was being bullied and I was being made fun of, and when everybody laughed, I was so upset because of the situation, so mad that I wasn't being accepted. I released that by biting myself, and I still struggle with that today. Like it's something I still battle because I want to act out in all these situations, and that had become a coping mechanism for my feelings and emotions.
Right.
And I'm seeing that you kind of were dealing with the same stress, the same um, issues during that school, from what I understand.
Yeah. Um, yeah, for sure. It sounds very similar, like the
Yeah,
emotional stuff of all of that.
yeah,
Um, when I was also 16, right before junior year was when I got my first service dog for diabetes. Because dogs can actually smell if your blood sugar is too high or too low, and then they alert to it.
that's so
And,
cool.
yeah. And there were so many times the school just wasn't making the proper medical accommodations that it was putting me in a whole lot of danger because I can't feel if my blood sugar is too high or too low like most people can.
Right.
And of course they did not want a dog in the school. Like
Yeah.
they had a whole fit about it. And I was like, well, I have a 504 plan. It's legally binding. You can't say no.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
more. So when the other kids started, like the kids who had been picking on me, and it wasn't just verbal, it was physical too.
Dang.
Um, yeah, so those kids started going at my dog in the same ways, both verbal and physical. Like they would. So I remember there was one morning somebody was walking with a water bottle, just kind of swinging their arm with it, and then they hit her in the face as they walked by with it.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Um, there was this one boy in first period every morning. He would harass the heck out of my dog, trying to get her to bark, like jumping at her, trying to scare her, barking at her, trying to get her to bark back. And like, no matter how many times I would tell him to stop, he would not. And I looked
Jeez.
over at the teacher one morning, and he's just like sitting back in his chair, his hands behind his head, and he's just watching. And I'm like, "You're not gonna, you're not gonna do anything about this."
Just a courtesy,
And so
bud.
right? So, you can't abuse a dog forever and it never snap back, right? So
Right.
4 months, somebody got in her face and just she barely nipped them on the nose, like barely broke the skin. But the principal, who hated me, called my mom and made up the whole story about how my dog had essentially mauled somebody and there was blood everywhere.
Oh,
And so I get
jeez.
home. I was like, so what really happened? Because I know that's not true. I was like, so I explained everything. And so, of course, I couldn't take the dog back to school with me. And I ended up in alternative school. And yeah, that was just a whole thing.
Yeah. Man, can't catch a break to save your life. Can ya?
I
Dang it.
couldn't.
That's rough. That's
Yeah.
really rough. Let's talk about the eating disorder because I mean, obviously, our bodies need nutrition for
Right.
function. Did you notice like just being tired a lot, or did you sleep a lot, or how
I
did you
don't
get
really,
how did you get the sustenance you needed to get through your days? Like, what would you eat?
looking back on it, I don't know how I wasn't super tired and sleeping all the time. I think
Yeah.
there was, at least somewhat during the school day, there was that sense of adrenaline because I never felt
You're in fight or
safe.
flight. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that kind of on a little bit,
Yeah.
but like even in alternative school, it was still way too easy to hide it. So it just all this time, it was getting worse and worse.
Yeah. So, so so obviously you graduated.
I almost didn't.
Woo, squeaker.
Yeah, the second years when I was in alternative school,
Mm,
and by the end of that, I realized I could not rehabilitate this dog. Like
weird.
she saw it too many times, and so she was just always on alert, and I guess wanting to protect me. So
Yeah.
like I her at a friend's pet store for the day, and he said as soon as I walked out the door, she just relaxed, and I was like, oh, I'm the problem. She can't relax if she's so
Oh,
he's a diabetic too, so I ended up giving her to him,
oh,
and then I
cool.
ended so I trained my own dog after that and went back to normal school with a different dog
Surprise, you
senior
guys.
year.
You thought you got rid of me. Guess who's
I know
back?
they were not
Back
happy at
again.
all.
I
Yeah,
bet. I bet.
really not.
I
Um,
bet.
and then like, I mean, people didn't mess with that dog as much because he looked scarier. There was a few kids who actually asked if he was gonna bite them, and I just and then walk away. So I didn't
Oh.
much senior year. It was more the faculty because they still weren't happy about me being back. But like for years on end, I was going into this environment where I had almost died multiple times because of the lack of medical accommodations.
Dang.
And it was just like I would hear my alarm in the morning and immediately go into a panic attack. It
Oh
was
man.
really bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think it was maybe 3 months before graduation. I kind of decided that I was done and I'd had enough, and
Yeah.
I overdosed on insulin, trying
Wow.
to commit that way because I
Wow.
knew
So it got really bad for you.
it did. Because
Yeah.
I didn't understand back then that when you're self-harming, you're essentially opening the door for self-hatred and eventually suicide.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and a
Because
lot of
we're
people,
not dealing with those feelings and emotions, and
yeah,
when we're not getting the help we need, it takes a huge toll on our self-esteem.
yeah, and not having a support system also made it pretty sad. There was nobody I felt safe enough to reach out to.
Well, you're here, so thank God
Yeah, God
that
did
you
that.
failed. I
Yeah, so
too am a failure, so that's awesome. That's a cool failure to be. That's cool to have something to fail at. That's okay.
I feel that
Um,
way.
In less than 1 year, God would lead me to Summer Day and her life-changing program. I would marry the love of my life. I mended broken relationships, even the ones with my children. I started a podcast called rockbottomsup.com, dedicated to those addicted and in recovery. Now, I'm standing on a stage telling you no more. Not one more time, not one more day. Will we allow Satan to pacify us while he destroys our life divinely given to us by God?
Benny, I
What
got
I
like
did,
a question for you.
yeah,
Just with the kids that have been in our shoes that are struggling in their school right now. How can we speak to them? How can we speak to the parents? What could we do to help that struggling child? Like what what would you say to that parent or that child who's battling right now like we have?
I would say, as much as your kid is probably gonna hate you and pitch a fit, don't let them isolate. Because I would
Mm,
just go home and sit in my room, and that like I was alone with my thoughts and my emotions and my feelings, and that was feeding into it and making it worse. So
wow.
don't let them hide, and just let them know that you're there. Like be that safe space for them. Don't ever
Wow.
invalidate what they're trying to tell you.
Oof, that gave me chills. That is so Because I think parents have such a tough time relating to their kid, which is funny to me because they were all kids at one point, you know?
Yeah.
And I think maybe because of the process that they went through, either they didn't have to deal with it, or they just don't know how to relate to it. But that is extremely impactful. Don't let your child isolate. Get involved. I think it's so easy nowadays that kids get wrapped up on their phone and they
Yes.
just lose themselves in whether it be social media, YouTube, whatever it is. Like it's really important to be an active parent, and really take that time. And I think you said something really important there. Don't unvalidate what they have to say, because these are true feelings and emotions that they are going through, and you don't have
Right.
to understand, but you do have to listen, and you do need to
Yeah.
validate them for what they're going through, because obviously it's impacting and affecting their life.
Yeah. And also on that note, it's like, it's so easy for parents to look at the way the world was when they were in school and be like, you must be exaggerating. Like, it can't be that bad.
Right,
Like,
which is completely
what?
invalidating.
Yeah, those parents would look at me and be like, there's no way a teacher spent an entire period talking about how you should have never been in school with your dog to begin with after you left. But it did
Jeez.
happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's
No,
easy to just
that's so that's so powerful, Brandy. Thank you for bringing that up. Because again, like I know there's a parent out there who's just like, how do I help my kid? How do I help my kid? And the first place you can start with is being available, and give them that safe place to be. Because if you don't give that to them, they're not going to have you rub their face in what's causing them pain all day and make it twice as worse by not
yeah.
listening and understanding or validating their feelings and emotions. So parents, give your child that safe place. It's so crucial, to have that open relationship, to be that safe place where they can come and vent, or just have somebody to understand what they're going through. You don't have to relate, but you do have to listen, and it's so important that you do that.
Yes, definitely.
So
So
you graduated, praise God, barely by the skin of your teeth.
did. It was
Um,
miraculous that I did not die, because the amount of insulin that I took, like, there's no way I should still be here. But
well,
it peaks in about an hour, and I remember checking my sugar after an hour and it wasn't even low. And I
yeah,
was like, what? Like, what is going on here? And
yeah,
that was my first encounter with God, really, was that moment where I heard him just kind of whisper into my heart. He was like, I'm not done with you yet.
let's go. Let's
Yeah.
go. So, you're self-harming, you have an eating disorder, you graduated through high school, which was probably a praise God, you know,
Yeah.
waking up, hearing that alarm and going through a panic attack. That probably alleviated a little bit of your stress, but yet, at this point, you probably were struggling with a lot of self-esteem and confidence issues, not being heard. Um, what happened after high school?
I mean, yeah, struggling with the self confidence and everything, but also I had spent so long in such a toxic environment where I was just trying to stay alive because it
Yeah,
felt like everyone killed me all the time. I was always getting it from somebody.
right.
So from that, and then like literally overnight, you're out of it, and it's
Yeah,
like, well, calm. I didn't know how to handle that. I was like,
yeah,
what is this? What do I do? How do I handle this? I don't know how to exist without constant conflict, you know?
right. So how did you handle it?
At first I took a year off just to try to decompress, and that didn't really help a whole lot because I still didn't really know how to deal with my emotions.
Yeah,
So then did like whole 2 semesters of college, and I just could not hack it. Like
yeah,
it was just being back in the school environment. It just re-triggered everything.
yeah,
And yeah, there was this point where I had made friends with a girl named Miranda, and then me and Miranda started getting tight. And there was this one point where she lived 4 hours south of me at the time. So when we saw each other, it was like after a few weeks had passed. And she saw me one day, and then like a month later, she saw me again. And she was like, you don't look good. You look skinnier. Like you look like you've lost weight. And that was the first time anybody said anything like that to me. And I was like, I don't think so. I don't think I did, because I didn't believe it. Like I genuinely did not think I had lost any weight. And she finally convinced me to like actually weigh myself on a scale. And I was like, oh, I have lost weight.
Wow. She
was like, there's something wrong with you. And that kind of jarred me a little bit. Like, oh wait, this is catching up with me now. What do I do? But at the time, my parents had been fostering kids, so like there was kind of always some level of chaos in the house just from the foster kids.
Oh, I bet. Wow.
So there was always something going on, and it kept my parents kind of distracted. So it was a lot easier for me to hide the eating disorder just because of all the foster kids coming and going. But then Miranda invited me to come stay at her house. So it was just Miranda and her parents and me in the house. And then it became like glaringly obvious to them, look, there's something wrong with you. You have an eating disorder.
Wow. So you got, I mean, cat's out of the bag. You know, you kind of got faced with, okay, now this, you know, now this eating issue that I have is becoming apparent to others. How did that affect you?
That was really hard. Miranda is actually the one who convinced me to try going to therapy for it. And I did for a while, but nobody wanted to like address the trauma of it. From there, I had just kind of conceded that this is always going to be a problem. It's that whole like once an addict, always an addict mentality. That was so much of a depressing thought to me that it just kind of made it worse in a way. So as soon as I turned 21, I started using alcohol as a coping mechanism on top of the eating. Like it started out as just like alcohol makes me tired. So it started out as just using it to sleep at night because I couldn't sleep, and it's kind of escapism, like escaping into sleeping, and it was going to get worse. Yeah. So I accidentally got hooked on tramadol because doctors told me it wasn't addictive, and it was. Yeah. And I started mixing it with alcohol because I figured out that if I took 2 pills of the tramadol, then I would it didn't fix the joint pain that I was feeling, but it made me not care about the joint pain or the emotional pain I was dealing with. And I liked that feeling a little too much. Right. And then I very quickly figured out that if I took 1 pill and mixed it with alcohol, then I got the same effect. So I wouldn't have to use so much of the tramadol to cope with life.
Right.
Yeah. And, you know, as a type 1 diabetic, those things don't mix very well. Your body can go into something diabetic ketoacidosis, which in layman's terms, your body's shutting down. Like it doesn't have enough insulin to convert glucose into energy. So it starts breaking down muscle and fat and organs and everything else. And it's like just a body-wide shutdown.
Oh, no.
And tramadol triggered that. Well, yeah, it was just alcohol. Too much alcohol triggered it. I remember I went to the ER and doctors don't really care why it got triggered. They just get so focused on treating it. So I got away with nobody figuring out what was going on or what had happened. But I remember the doctor coming in and she was like, you're really lucky you came in when you did, because if you would have waited even a couple more hours, you probably would have been dead. And if not dead, then in the ICU with permanent organ damage. And I remember just like feeling so shaken to my core. And it took me a while to realize that like I didn't understand why I was so shaken at first, because I've almost died so many times from diabetes. And I think the what freaked me out so bad this time was that this time it was a direct result of something that I did to myself. Like it was completely my choice and my fault that I almost died accidentally. Because it wasn't suicidal. I wasn't trying to die. I was just trying to numb the pain. I met this woman whose name is Tracy. And I met her at a church here in Georgia. And she was like, she kind of immediately knew something was wrong with me, and she just sat with me, and she didn't really try to push me to talk about it or anything. She was like, we're here visiting from Maryland, and our church is having this women's conference in 2 weeks. We would love for you to come. And she was like, I will personally take care of making sure you have food while you're there. I will make sure you have a place to stay. I'll help you with gas money. I just want you to come. And, you know, because of all those broken promises from mommy, I didn't really believe her at first. And I felt like God was telling me to go. So I texted Tracy like a week before the conference, and I was like, I want to go. I want to come up there for the conference. And she was like, awesome. So she cash apped me some gas money. She was true to her word. She made sure I was taken care of the entire time I was there. And while I was there, I met this woman named Chelsea. And Chelsea was really good with me the entire conference. Like I would stay with her, and she would just like keep an eye on me. And if I wasn't feeling good or something, she would check in with me and be like, hey, are you all right? What's going on? And there was this one moment where Chelsea was praying with me and doing a whole lot of deliverance with me. And she just all of a sudden called out spirit of alcoholism and spirit of pharmakia. And it was like I could physically feel this weight lift off of my chest.
Oh, wow.
And like it was just gone. Like I didn't want to drink after that, and I didn't want the pills after that.
Wow. That's so
it was
cool.
like it was insane.
Wow. So, having battled with alcohol for a little bit and pharmaceuticals, you don't have, you don't have those tendencies to want those anymore then after that experience.
No, like
Wow. Wow. That's cool.
yeah,
That's an
yeah,
amazing spiritual experience.
it was. And then a
So,
few months.
as far as your addictions goes, you're still at this point you're battling with your eating disorder, right?
Yeah, that was the last one to go. So
Oh,
that
wow.
was actually right at a year ago. I went up to, it was a few months after, it's like 4 or 5 months after meeting Chelsea. I went to Bethel out in Redding, California, Bethel Church. They had a week-long worship school. And there was this Indian lady who was volunteering at the school. And I'm half Indian, so obviously I was gravitating towards her. And we would talk, and she would tell me all about India, because I've never been to India. She would tell me all about where she was from and what it was like and all that stuff. And after the school was over, like the very last night in Reading, I was at the church, and I saw her in the corner. And I just like immediately gravitated towards her. And she was with her husband and another guy, like an older gentleman that was with them, who was also from India. And Indian culture, anyone who's old enough to be your parent, you just call him auntie or uncle. So that's what I called her auntie, and he was uncle. His real name is actually Abu. And so uncle, his second language is English. His first language is, I think it's Malayalam. That's how you say it. Maybe. I don't know. But when he starts prophesying over people, that's the language he slips back into. And auntie has to translate for it. And that was a very new experience for me. I'd never been prophesied over in that way before. And there was something about it that just felt like a different kind of connection. And it was like all the things he was speaking over me and prophesying, like he was very, very accurate, but he was also catching things nobody else had caught before. And so it didn't take long for him to look at me and just stop and go, you don't like food, do you? And then he stops and he thinks and he's like, no, you do like food. You just don't eat properly and you don't drink properly. And you don't even get hungry or thirsty anymore, do you? And I'm just like, whoa, because, it'd been 20 years and nobody had ever caught that there was an eating disorder without me actually telling them that there was an eating disorder. And so I just kind of like nodded, like, oh, this is weird. Okay, what's happening now? And he was like, if we get a cup of water and we pray over it, will you drink it as a prophetic act of resetting your digestive system? And so like in the back of my head, I'm like, Jesus, is this from you? Is this normal? Is this okay? And like I felt peace about it. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And so I did. And like literally from that moment, those eating disorder voices, I could still hear them, but it was like they were underwater. So they were a lot easier to ignore.
Wow.
And then 2 weeks after that, Francie Chapman, who's married to Doug the Bounty Hunter, and I had met her a few times before, but she was just praying with people over trauma, and just like trauma that didn't want to go away. And literally those whole 2 weeks were just, my head was filled with thoughts of the hospital and being diagnosed with diabetes and how that trauma led to the eating disorder, and I couldn't make it stop. So I went to Francie, and she made me wait until last to pray with me. And so she's like, it was really hard for me to actually say what was wrong, because sometimes when I get stressed out, it's just hard to talk. And Francie has always been very, very good about just waiting for me to say what I need to say. Like, she never pressures me or rushes me or anything. Like, I know I'm safe with her and I can take my time with her. So she did that again. And she just waited a few minutes for me to finally be able to tell her what was going on with the hospital memories. I didn't even tell her that it was tied to an eating disorder. I just told her there was all these memories from the hospital that just like wouldn't get out of my head, you know? And so she just sweetly wrapped me up in a hug, and she prayed with me, her and her assistant. And by the time they were done, those voices were like totally gone, and I haven't heard them at all since then.
Wow. And that's been a year or over a year?
It's been a little over a year.
That's awesome, Brandi. You know, I've listened to, you know, several experiences where, you know, people have been battling addiction their whole entire life, and, you know, through a spiritual experience, they literally had been healed. And it's cool to have you on here and you know, explain your experience and, you know, your walk with God and how God has shown up in your life. For the addict out there battling right now who may not believe in, you know, God even, or spiritual experiences, like what advice could you give them to maybe open up to, you know, the idea or possibility that God is there?
Tell them, number one, as long as there is breath in your body, there is hope for you. Don't ever think that you're too far gone. And the other thing I would say is, don't be afraid to go to God and just be real with him. Like, say whatever is on your heart. You can go to God and say, I don't really believe in you, but here's what's going on. And he's going to meet you where you are, because there was a point in time where I, not that long ago, went to God and I was like, listen, this happened to me when I was little. I didn't learn to trust authority. I don't trust you. And I will never forget the response I got from him was, it's okay. I see everything you've been through, and I wouldn't expect you to trust me yet. But we can work on it slowly together if you want to. So he's gentle, and he's going to meet you where you are.
Amen to that. Well, thanks so much for being on the show today, Brandi. You definitely brought experiences that we haven't had on the show yet. So I hope that, you know, your story resonates with our listeners and gives them a different perspective. You know, recovery from addiction doesn't always look the same. It's not all about, you know, going to a recovery center or sitting in classes, you know, reading books. You know, recovery, you know, meets the individual, no matter what age, no matter, you know, what your background is. And, you know, there are many ways that we do recover. So thanks for being on here, guys. This has been another great episode on Rock Bottoms Up. I just want to leave you with this. No matter where you are in your journey, recovery is not just possible. It's within your reach and is necessary to live a more happier and meaningful life. I stand here today as living proof that change is achievable. Brandi's standing here before you, that change is achievable, that transformation is real, and that a brighter, sober tomorrow awaits each and every one of us. Never lose sight of the incredible strength that's within you. You have the power to rewrite your story and reclaim your life. Remember, even in your darkest moments, we have the power to rise up out of it. We have survived 100% of our worst days, and we're not going to stop today. Believe in yourself. Take that first step and know that the path to recovery is going to help you say I can instead of I can't. And it's going to open doors to possibilities you never thought were possible because you started to finally invest in you. We are in this together. We may not be fighting the same battles, but we are fighting the same enemy. And together we're going to take back what is ours, our life. We are united, walking this path towards a future filled with hope, healing, freedom, while helping to pick up our new brothers and sisters along the way. Thank you for joining us here on Rock Bottoms Up. This has been your host, Chad Sommer, telling you to keep fighting for your freedom. You're worth it. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Also, we would love to hear your feedback, so comment or email us at rockbottomsuppodcast@gmail.com. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us here on Rock Bottoms Up. Visit rockbottomsuppodcast.com and get your free gift, Rock Bottoms Enough. 5 action steps to never hitting rock bottom again. And we will see you next Monday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time.